For this episode of reviewing how games run on budget hardware, we will be reviewing Battlefield 1. In this review series, I take budget hardware and review how games perform on it. In this series, our budget PC features an AMD FX 6300, a GTX 1050 Ti, and 8GB of RAM. So, let's see how Battlefield 1 fares on this hardware. So, first things first, this game is the definition of a CPU bottleneck. At first, when loading into the game, everything was set to low and I set the resolution to 900p. As you can see from the team deathmatch footage in the background, it runs okay, but when you switch to larger game modes like Operations or Conquest, good lord, this game stresses CPUs. At first glance, this game is using about 6.5 gigs of system RAM and about 1.5 gigs of VRAM. This seems about normal, but when looking at other performance charts, it gets rough. The gameplay up now is at 720p and the CPU is maxed out nearly at all times. The 1050 Ti, even when at 1080p, is hovering only at around 50% utilization. The CPU, however, is almost maxed out, and Core 4 is the most heavily taxed core for some reason. Frame rates, even when at 720p in low settings, frequently drop to sub 30 FPS. Large-scale game modes are not playable on this hardware. Smaller-scale game modes such as TDM and Domination are perfectly fine, and they're actually pretty fun to play, but Conquest and Operations stress the CPU extremely heavily. Both the Xbox One and PS4 have frame rate issues in large-scale game modes as well. The massive CPU bottleneck in the consoles means that they have a tough time rendering the large amounts of terrain and assets, and I suspect the same issue applies to our budget PC. It's honestly kind of disappointing because COD World War II, which was the last game that I reviewed on this hardware, also had a huge CPU bottleneck issue. I don't know what's going on with CPU optimization. Besides performance issues, this game actually doesn't look too terribly bad on the defaulted settings. Granted, they're on low, but I didn't really try raising the settings past low because the frame rate was already not great. Low settings actually didn't look too terrible either. Ambient occlusion isn't great, ground texture detail looks a little blurry, but it actually looks somewhat comparable to the Xbox One version. Besides different texture details and ambient occlusion and different texture filtering, I didn't really bother raising or changing the resolution much because no matter what resolution I put it on, it really didn't make a huge difference to frame rate. 1080p performed almost exactly the same as 720p, and 900p performed almost exactly the same as 720p as well. So really, besides anything above 1080p, any resolution will work on this hardware. Battlefield 1 is a fun game to play, but like Call of Duty World War II, CPU usage issues hold the game back on this hardware. Once again, I would only recommend to play this game on a PC with a higher end CPU. This game seems to like quad-core CPUs, but the bad single-threaded performance of the FX 6300 is suspect for why this game runs so poorly. CPUs with good single-threaded performance should run this game fine, but the FX 6350 that is in the game's minimum requirements list is most likely not accurate. This review was short, but there honestly wasn't much to cover. The CPU bottleneck is too severe to fully enjoy this game. Next episode, we will be covering Battlefield 4. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.